Hey guys, so it's about 10 minutes from go time, and we are just here actually chit chatting. AJ just went to get his musket so he can do some show and tell, and it's going to be a great, great show. And I am so excited. He is just so, show of hands for those of you who are already here. Have any of you actually read his book? He has several books, but this particular one, The Year of Living Constitutionally, because I got to tell you, it is a great book. I just fell in love with it.
All
And he
right.
said, "Look at that musket. Oh my gosh." Well,
Okay.
maybe
Much
Easter
better. I
maybe
feel much
Easter eggs for
safer.
do ya? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
One of the
Then,
questions we have for you when we start the show is, and by the way, can you hear me okay?
yeah, yeah, you
Okay.
sound great.
Yeah, we even have a question about the musket for you. So, but maybe a little Easter egg for the people who are joining early. If you have anything you want to share about your musket, or is that a Lego city behind you?
Yeah, this is, this, I know it's confusing my brands, but this is the closet where I do my podcast about puzzles. I have a puzzle podcast.
Right, right.
So that is, yes, there's all sorts of puzzle paraphernalia. These are called the classic 15 puzzle. So that is confusing, but I'll hope that people can figure it out.
Oh, you are
The
truly a
Constitution
Renaissance
is a
man.
puzzle.
That that is very true. Hi, Elizabeth. So I don't know if you have heard when I've done some other lives that uh, it turns out that I've been tracing my lineage, my ancestry, so that I can apply for Canadian citizenship. And
Oh,
I descend from both the Acadians, from who I guess got kicked out of Nova Scotia, and Quebec. So,
wow. Good for
th
you.
so that yeah, yeah, and actually a little preview for the people who got here early, and I love it when you guys get here early. The person who's been helping me with that, his name is Brian, and his nickname is Muggsy. He's a really well-known genealogist. He does Gonzo genealogy, and he is going to come on with me next week on Wednesday. He actually offered to do this, which is a huge honor because he usually doesn't like when he gets invitations to be on shows, he turns them down, and he offered, so I feel so special.
Awesome.
Um, but he is going to tell people about the strange things that he has found in my ancestry. So that should be a really fun show. But he has found, and I'm going to share it later on Facebook. One of my relatives who came over from England had to sign. It was in 1619. So even before our country, even before you were living
Wow.
constitutionally, he had to sign an oath of allegiance to the king.
Oh,
And Muggsy told me that what they did was they had all these people locked in a church surrounded by soldiers, and they couldn't leave until they signed the oath of allegiance. And I'm thinking, gosh, that really sounds like our administration today.
great point. Yes, that does not sound like democracy or freedom.
No, it really doesn't, which of course that's, the whole point of our country, right, is to get away from that. So,
Right.
so we're gonna be talking about your year of living constitutionally, and so we are gonna be celebrating this is to celebrate our country's birthday month.
Happy
Uh,
birthday.
yeah, but again, we have about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. I would love you to tell us about your other projects and books. I know I've read at least one other of your books, so I know you have more than one. And,
I
tell
do.
people, promo it.
Of course. Yes. Well, uh, probably my most best-selling book was called The Year of Living Biblically, and it was actually a prequel to this one about the Constitution, because the idea was to try to follow the Bible as literally as possible, and and it was all about how should we interpret the Bible and how originalist should be we be when we do the Bible. But things got pretty crazy because Yeah, I tried to follow the 10 commandments, but I also followed, Leviticus that has rules like you cannot shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were, so I just let the whole thing grow, and I had quite some topiary on my chin. Uh, it says you cannot wear clothes made of mixed fabrics.
I remember
So,
that.
yeah, had to redo my wardrobe. No poly
Right.
cotton blends. It says you have to stone all sorts of people: adulterers, astrologers, Sabbath breakers, your kids if they are unruly. So I did do
Okay,
some stoning.
did your kids have real fun with the joke about stoning versus being stoned? Like, "Dad, you said we could be stoned."
Ah, they were a little young for that. The oldest at the time was about 2.5, so he
Okay,
was not up for making those puns. But yeah, they did. He definitely did like my beard and grabbing onto it, and was sad when it was shaved.
okay,
But
and
it was fascinating to see how. I mean, it was sort of a similar premise, which was partly an earnest exploration of religion, and partly it was to say, "Oh, you want to be a literalist? Let me show you what literalism looks like." I became the ultimate fundamentalist to show that that is not the best way to approach the Bible.
I don't know if you saw, and there's no reason you would've, but I did oh gosh, now I can't remember the name of the organization, but I did an exposé on the application of I can't remember the name of it now, but they basically are an enclave of people who claim to be literalists and like, quote, unquote, "originalists," not the way you use it, who you have to apply to live in their compound, and their application makes very clear that they only want, people who are extremely to the right, lily white, no Jewish people. I mean, and they are claiming, well, that's what the Bible says, which of course is not what the Bible says. So
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you take it literally, then you're going to be doing some very bizarre things. You can't say the names of the days of the week because uttering a pagan god is an abomination. So you couldn't say Thursday because that's Thor's day. So I mean, it just
Wo
goes
is
on and on.
Wednesday Woden's Day? Is that,
Yeah, Odin's Day is,
Wednesday? Okay.
yeah, and then Tuesday is I forget which one, Friday is Frida's Day. So, yeah, we are I mean, pagan gods are everywhere. The planets, you couldn't say the names of the planets.
Yeah, and like January, some of the months are after the planets,
Exactly.
right? Yeah,
That's right.
crazy.
So, yeah, we are breaking biblical laws,
Left
hundreds
and
of them
right.
every day. Right. So,
That is
there are
crazy.
good parts to the Bible, and I talk a lot about that, but, my big takeaway was, yes, the literalist approach to the Bible is not a great idea, and I feel the same way about the Constitution.
Right, and you've lived both now, which is way
Exactly.
more than anyone could ever ask of a living human being. So, again, we are so happy to have you here, and just in the last minute before we get to the top of the hour, tell us about your puzzle
Oh, yes, I am a huge fan
podcasting.
of puzzles, and so one of my books was called The Puzzler, where I tried to, uh, solve the hardest puzzles, in every genre: jigsaw, crossword, Sudoku, and meet all of these brilliant and quirky people. And I participated in the World Jigsaw Puzzle Championship with my
I
family.
remember, yeah,
Yes, that was exciting. So that was very fun, and it was sort of about why do we like puzzles, and can puzzles teach us to be better humans? And I came to the conclusion, yes, which is
really?
oh, absolutely. It teaches you to be solution oriented,
Okay.
to be curious, all of these good things. And of course, this may all be just rationalization for the fact that I spend an hour a day doing puzzles, but I believe it nonetheless.
And did you cross paths with Will Short?
Oh, yes, absolutely. He's in the book. And
Great.
actually, we did a big, long podcast episode with him that we're releasing next week. We're
Oh,
very
wow,
excited.
okay.
Yeah. And he
Alright,
gets very
well,
personal. It's like a Barbara Walters type thing.
very cool. Well, guys, you need to make sure to listen for that, and, if you came here because you're one of AJ's followers, welcome, so happy to have you here, and for all of my followers, if you are not following AJ, you absolutely should be because as you can tell, he is a very interesting fellow and also a very nice fellow. So with
All
that,
right,
we are at
back
the
at
top
you.
of the
Thank you,
hour.
Anne.
Yeah, thank you. We're at the top of the hour, so it gives me just this incredible pleasure to introduce our guest who is kicking off our My Country 'Tis of Thee series, which is a week-long live interview series where we are honoring America's birthday month. And I just thought, what better person to kick that off than someone who actually lived for a full year constitutionally, and he wrote about it, and AJ Jacobs, just welcome to Notes from the Front.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you.
So let's do the really easy part. And I saying that, with a chuckle. Tell us about what you did. What was the year of living constitutionally about? How did it come about? And what did you do?
Yeah, the year of living constitutionally was just like the title says. I tried to follow the Constitution as literally as possible. So, tried to express my rights using the mindset and tools that were available in 1789 to try to get it into the point of view of our founders to see what they were thinking. So that meant everything from expressing my First Amendment by writing with a quill pen. So I wrote a lot of the book with a quill pen, and I will tell you that actually was one of the great joys because I was away from my computer. I think I gained like 2 IQ points just from being away from
Away
all
from your
of it.
computer.
Yeah. And then for my Second Amendment rights, of course, I had a musket because that was the gun of the time. So I walked around New York with a musket. And there were basically two motivations for this. One was more earnest and one was slightly less earnest. The more earnest one was to really try to understand what was the mindset uh, back then. What were the good parts of our founding and what were the problematic parts, and how should we go from here? How should the founder's vision affect our decisions today? And the second part, which was a little less earnest, was that I had seen this swing towards originalism in the Supreme Court, which you write about beautifully, and this idea that we have to get back to the original public meaning of what the founders meant. And I always thought this was a bit of a flawed approach and an impossible approach because we don't know what the meaning was. And even if we do get to the meaning, then it is a very narrow. So the Second Amendment, if you're a true originalist, would apply to muskets. Um,
Mhm.
and and they are just such a radically different machine than modern weapons. It takes 15 steps to load and shoot a musket. It's like building something from IKEA. It takes forever. So you could not do a mass shooting with a musket the way you can with a modern. So it was sort of to explore originalism. I didn't want to mock it because there's some brilliant people who are originalists, but also to show what I think are the flaws in a strict originalist interpretation of the Constitution, which has had a huge effect on our lives. It's not just theoretical, it's affected how we worship, what we read, and what guns we carry, because five of the nine justices have identified as, or 6 of the 9 have identified as originalists in some way.
Mhm. Right, exactly, and we can get to more of that, like, if people are wanting to hear about specifically the Supreme Court in a bit, but I really want and I know the audience wants to know, what did it look like? What did that really look like for you? Like, you were walking around in a tricorn hat, you were carrying a musket, you were, what did a typical day for you that year look like? And also the sort of atypical days, meaning, I know that you and we even have a question that came in about your reenacting. Right? I
Oh,
think
yes,
you
yes.
joined a reenacting troupe, or I'm not even sure, do you call them a troupe? But,
That's right, the
um
2nd New Jersey Regiment. I love 'em. Well, yes, I mean, I spent a lot of time intellectually trying to get in their heads, so reading what they would have read, Montesquieu and etcetera, and writing, as I say, with a quill pen, which is a tremendously, I think it just makes you a deeper thinker. Also trying to ingest information the way they did. Ben Franklin, uh, his newspaper in Philadelphia came out twice a week, which is quite a different way to engage with information. It gives you much more time to think and react, as opposed to this fire hose of 24-hour news, which I'm
Mhm,
not
mhm.
sure is good for democracy. Uh, so there was that aspect, the intellectual aspect, and then I do like to commit to the bit. So I like to immerse myself in every way because I do feel actions affect our thoughts. So that meant dressing the part. I have my tricorn hat. Uh, I wore the whole outfit. I will say that alone made me grateful for some of the progress that we've made. And I think, as a country, we have made progress. It made me a little less cynical about our country. We're in a dip right now, thanks to our current president, but overall, I do think we've made some progress. Uh, and that can be in big things, but also small, like socks. I am a huge I am so grateful for the elastic in my socks because I would wear these 1700 socks and they would fall down my ankles because they were wool, no elastic, and you would have to put on a little belt every morning on your socks. So just the amount of time I spent putting belts on my socks, I was like, "You know what? There are some good things about modern life,
So
including medicine." RFK Jr. might not agree, but I think modern medicine is a huge step forward.
absolutely. And here's one of the questions that actually came in from our audience, which is, what thing did you find the most surprising in terms of how different it was, and what did you find the most similar?
Oh, that's interesting. Alright, well, let me tell you 2 surprising things, um, because they could be more, conceptual and more practical. So,
Okay.
the practical parts were things like the socks, things like, they didn't have running water in the kitchen. I mean, it was you would have to go out to the stream. So I tried to replicate that and,
Wait,
go
let me
to the
just
bathroom. Yeah,
you live in New York City, right?
I do. I live in New York City.
So there was
Exactly.
no stream you
There
could
was
go
no
to.
stream.
Okay.
I replicated it the best I could. I went to the far bathroom in my apartment and tried to bring water back. Um, there was also, as you know, it was not a good time to be a woman or a marginalized person. Uh, so Yeah, back then, women were under a legal system called coverture, which you
Mhm.
might probably know about, which basically treated married women like children. They had very few rights. They couldn't have a job without their husband's permission. They couldn't sign contracts. My wife owns a company, like an event company. So she's doing contracts every day, several. And I said, well, for this project, would it be okay if I refuse to allow you to sign contracts and I took it over? And she said, well, that'd be awesome. because I hate doing the contract. And it lasted like 5 hours because I was so confused and overwhelmed. I was like, "I can't do this." So, so that is a part that, was a big change. Now there were positive changes. There are things that were, I think, better then. A lot, probably most was worse then. As we know, it was sexist, racist, it smelled terrible socks. But there were parts that were better, and one of them actually was in your Substack, the letter from our founders, this idea of a civic responsibility,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
that was really woven into, at least for the privileged minority of white people, it was really woven into life. If there was a fire, you didn't call the fire department, you and the neighbors had a bucket brigade and were passing the bucket. Most men were in the militia. I don't wanna go back to, the militia, but I do think we have lost some sense of cohesive civic responsibility. The whole what what ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. All that good stuff, I think, and this author Yuval Harari talked about it on a podcast I heard. The other revolution around our time, or one of the other revolutions around that time, was the French Revolution, and they talked about liberty, equality, and fraternity. And we as a civilization have focused more on the liberty and equality parts, which I love. But it does seem the fraternity or sorority, it shouldn't just be
Yeah, well,
fraternity. Yeah, but the sort of the idea of a community has, I think, withered a bit, and that is dangerous. It's hard to have a country that solves problems when you don't have sort of a common base of ideals.
absolutely. I think we have, I mean, I can't say this positively because I don't know every single country, but I think we are probably on the far margins of countries that, where individuality, we just don't have those senses of community, uh, as much as it used to be and as much as other countries do. That's at least been my experience. And I
Yeah.
think so, related to that, when you did the reenacting, did you feel that sense of camaraderie that even though you were just, I wouldn't denigrate it by calling it play acting, but reenacting, even though you were just playing a part, did you feel like you were part of something greater than yourself? Did it engender that?
A little bit, a little bit. I mean, I could never say that I experienced what it was like to be a Revolutionary War soldier, but these people really, they pay attention to detail. So it was everything down to the number of stitches on the, on your uniform, and, uh, and it was nice because you were not allowed to talk politics unless it was the politics of the Federalists versus the Jeffersonians. Like you could not. So, but I happen to know there were Republicans and Democrats in the Second New Jersey Regiment, but but their idea was a little bit. And I did fight in the Battle of Monmouth in New Jersey, and it was super hot. I did die, but I did die in the shade. So it really wasn't that bad. It's like taking a rest in the shade. But I did find it moving in some sense. Uh, I have more mixed feelings about Civil War reenactment. That seems dicier to me. But
Mhm,
the
mhm.
Revolutionary War reenactment, I feel they talked about how they were really paying homage to the sacrifices that these people made for freedom because, yeah, like going up against the biggest, it's crazy. I mean, if I were alive then, I don't know about you, Anne, I'm not sure I would be out there. I would be kind of like, maybe I should pay another 2 cents for the tea tax and instead of getting strung up uh, for being a traitor. Like, that's a crazy amount of courage.
It really did. It really did, and I think I'm not gonna try and do the exact quote, but I read, in fact, recently that Washington said to someone that he knew that they were basically putting a rope around their necks,
Mm.
by doing this. And it was very, very brave, and, yeah, I absolutely agree on that. So another one of the questions we have are, what were the reactions you got when you were walking around New York City with a musket?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was very mixed. Some people would walk to the other side, say, "What the hell are you doing?" Shoot me dagger eyes. Sometimes people were like, "Oh, that's cool. Can I hold it?" It actually came in quite handy once when I walked into a coffee shop at the same time as another guy, and we walked in exactly the same time, and he was like, "You go first. I'm not gonna argue with a guy with a musket." So yeah, it was, I also think, I'm very lucky I'm a white man. If I had been a person of color, it could have been a very different experience, and
Yeah.
I'm very aware of that.
Absolutely, and, one of the questions is, so now you're gonna have to talk about this, can we have the recipe for your cake? So there was an
Oh,
it was it election cake? Is that I
that is
apologize
right.
that is it? Okay, because again, I read the book some time ago, but yeah, tell people about, this concept because and in fact, if you would elaborate on what leads up to it, because I think this really demonstrates a difference. Oh, such a dramatic difference as I'm thinking about it in how elections, the tone of elections back then, and, they were actually celebrated. It was like a party, right?
That's exactly right. It
And
was like a
now, ugh,
party. It was like, yeah, it was like going to a music festival. There were parades and songs and, and rum punch, a lot of rum punch, and cakes. There was election cakes. And of course, we have to always acknowledge this was for the privileged few who could vote, the white men, but the women would make the election cakes, and they were, yeah, floured, just the usual type. I think they had rum in them. But I thought this was a lovely reframe because they were so joyous to have this unprecedented opportunity to choose their own leader, something that
right.
hadn't happened for thousands of years. And so they saw this as not some annoying chore, but as an amazing opportunity and something to be celebrated. And I love that point of view. So I tried to resurrect that, and I was able to. Uh, during my year. So I started a movement where I got people in every one of the 50 states to bake cakes and bring
Wow.
them to the polls and hand them out to the election workers and people there. And yeah, it was very fun. I did use Facebook to rally the troops, which maybe was not totally, appropriate to the era, although Facebook is one of the older platforms, so
Well, there you go.
I shoulda
Well
used MySpace, but it was very lovely to sort of try to recapture that spirit of excitement around elections.
so talk a little bit more, for people, especially the ones that are just joining us, that about the revelry, about why, why were they celebrating so much? Because this was just a few years that they even had the opportunity to vote, right? I mean, even, previously in the colonies, there were, governors that had been installed from the UK, from Great Britain. So, can you talk a little bit about exactly why they thought that was such a reason to celebrate?
Yeah, well, just like you said, it was such a novel experience, and the voting was actually quite different. You voted by voice, so you did not do a secret ballot, uh, and the the interesting thing was you were supposed to be proud to vote and that you didn't wanna hide your, allegiance. You were just proud to be a part of it. Of course, that had some downsides, so I am glad we imported the secret ballot from Australia. They were the ones who gave us that idea. Uh, but I think a lot of it was this anti-monarchy feeling. Uh, when we started our country, we changed all of the word king. King's College became Columbia College. King Street, there were King Streets in all the cities, and they became Congress Street. The King Minuet Dance became Congress Minuet Dance. And that, to me, is I love that energy, and
Mhm.
I love the No Kings protests, which I've been to, because I think those are super American. And this encroachment of this imperial presidency that we have is really against the founders' vision. And I find it really disturbing. One of the most fascinating bits of history I ran across was during the Constitutional Convention. Uh, most of the delegates thought, yeah, let's have the three branches: executive, judicial, legislative. But there was no consensus on how to set up the executive. The executive, a lot of people wanted a council of presidents because they said, "What? Why would we have a single president? That's insane.
So
That is
co-presidents.
co-presidents, more parliamentary, much more parliamentary system." Uh, Sometimes there were proposals for three presidents. Uh, Ben Franklin talked about a council of 12 presidents. And it came down to a very close vote. They debated it for weeks. So it's a very interesting thought experiment. If 6 or 7 people in that room in Philadelphia had voted differently, we would have had an executive branch with multiple people instead of one person. And one of the delegates was so upset that we chose a single president because he said, this is the fetus of monarchy, which is kind of a weird phrase, but he was right. And that fetus has grown. It's been growing for decades. So it's not just Trump. It was, even presidents I love, like Lincoln and FDR, increased the president's power. But Trump has taken it to this alarming, insane, monarchical extreme. And I mean, if that would be one of, along with iPhones and people wearing flip-flops, that if the founders came back and saw how powerful the presidency is, they would just flip their wigs.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's, I'm given your tour through that history, do you how hopeful are you for November? Because I am pretty hopeful.
Good. Yeah, I like that. You made me more hopeful. I mean, I am very wary of predicting the future, especially now. I think
Mhm, mhm.
it's always been hard to predict the future, but it's just become uh, exponentially harder because of all of these crazy factors like AI. So I'll be cautiously optimistic. I'll do what I can, but I'm going in with no expectations one way or the other. I'm just going to let's deal with it. Whatever happens, let's deal with it and keep fighting. Because even if things go well, it's not over. Like,
It
we got to keep fighting.
it's never going to be over, and it's
Yeah.
always gonna be, the pendulum going back and forth and back and forth. I mean, I hope it's never over because if it is over, then that means our country, you know, the experiment ended.
Right. I like
Eh
that. Yes, framing it as an experiment is I love that because yeah, I'm all about experiments.
well, and it's important to remember that what we're celebrating and observing, this month and even here in this show is our country's 250th year, and that is just, our ba it's we're a baby. We're barely crawling in the timeline of country history. There are countries out there that have existed since, the era BCE, since thousands of years before that. And, even like Japan it has been around since 400 AD. I mean,
Right.
we're just a tiny, tiny blip. And I think people forget that. And of course, it doesn't feel good in the moment. But if you take the long view, I think that's where I get hope is, that this is so not over.
I like that. And also, I like that because trying to keep the mindset of that we are young and can still be flexible, because I think rigidity, you want some structure, but you don't want to get rigid. And I think that is something that we have uh, is a real danger. And partly, I blame the founders because they made a miscalculation. It was not. I don't think it was an intentional uh, uh, mistake, but it was they made it too hard to amend the Constitution. I think if they could come back today and see that there have only been 27 amendments and none in the last couple of decades, they would be like, "Oh, that we made it way too hard." Uh, because they were very forward thinking. A lot of them were very flexible entrepreneurial thinkers. And Jefferson, for all of his faults, which are many, he was particularly radical in changing the Constitution. I think he said he wanted a new Constitution every 17 years. Was that it? He, so they all thought that the Constitution should be much more flexible than it is right now, and that is, I think, one of the flaws, and that's why the Supreme Court has so much power because the Constitution does need to change. It needs to change either in amendments or it needs to change in the way we interpret it. And unfortunately, these 9 unelected people have this incredible power to interpret it, and I don't think that that is a good system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, although, when it shifts to to the more liberal side, then I mean, so again, it's always, a balancing sort of a thing.
Right.
Um, but I do know that you have more thoughts on that, I think, and I'd love you to share them.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, it's funny because, yes, the Warren Court, which gave us all of these landmark civil rights uh, cases, like, yeah, I think it's sort of seduced people on the left into thinking, "Oh, this is great that we're able to have these justices with so much power." But then, when it switched to the other side, we realized that was a bit of a devil's bargain. Uh, but yeah, I would say I find it very. I don't. The founders did not want the Supreme Court to have that much power. They didn't want the president to have this much power or the Supreme Court. To them, the legislative branch, Congress, was first among equals. Article 1 is more than twice as long as either of the other articles, and it spells out their powers uh, which have just disappeared. Uh, tariffs. That's what Congress, not Trump. Trump has no right to be doing tariffs, but Congress ceded it to the presidency over the years. War powers as well should be the founders split up war powers because they didn't want one
Right.
branch. So Congress had the right to declare war, and the president would execute the war. But now it's 95% the president declaring and executing the war.
Well, and
S
to be fair, Congress still has that power. We have a milquetoast Congress right now
right.
that won't stand up to to anyone really. So one of our audience has observed that the Constitution, if it was easily changed, would be changed to enrich the rich and the rest of us be damned. What do you think about that?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Well, there is a. I mean, eh, I'm more optimistic that the Constitution might be changed in the right direction. Uh, it goes to this very interesting debate because there are people who say that our Constitution is so flawed that we gotta get rid of it. For instance, the Electoral College, so
Mhm,
flawed, it's
mhm.
just built in, or the fact that the Senate is so unproportional to the population. So there are people on both the left and the right who say get rid of it. The left say get rid of it because of these fundamental flaws, these anti-democratic flaws in the Constitution. Then there are people on the right who say we got to get rid of it because it took away too much power from the states. So there are very powerful movements on both sides. I am very leery of those because just for like your viewer said, I worry that it would be dangerous to have. Uh, we don't know. We don't know how the Constitution would be changed. It might be changed to ways that create a fascist state. Uh, but that said, going back to the idea of, I just am a little more optimistic that if you have the right structure where people can vote for their representatives and you have a representative democracy, that we could change the Constitution in a good way as opposed to making it more elite. Oh, and before I will shut up in 1 second,
No,
but I
don't.
think that brings up a great point, which is uh, the Constitution, I believe, is not monolithic. It has uh, There are people who say it's elitist and anti-democratic, the result of a slaveocracy. And then there are people who say it was the birth of freedom, the birth of democracy. I think both are true. Both
Yes.
are true simultaneously. It has elements of elitism and anti-democracy, but it also has elements of this amazing advance where we got rid of a king and started elections. People can choose their. So it's sort of a battle between those two over the centuries. And I like the framing of Frederick Douglass, uh, which then influenced Obama and MLK, which is that it's the Constitution and the Declaration are both promissory notes. Promissory notes. We have a deranged monarch right now. I won't argue with that. I will not argue with that. But yes, that it's a promissory note. Even if the founders were hypocrites, many of them, uh, it was their ideas were better than they were as people, and that
Mhm.
we have to fight to live up to the ideals that are in the Constitution and the Declaration.
I agree 100% with both, and yes, both can be true and both are true. I mean, you have to go back to the actual time, which you did, as best as one could do, absent a TARDIS or other time machine. And I wanna go back to that, but before we go any further in any direction, I wanna circle back to, the person who asked if they can have your recipe for the election cake. Uh, is that available anywhere online that they can find it?
Absolutely, yes. On my website, ajjacobs.com, there is a section on the election cake project, and also on Instagram, and Facebook, we started an election cake project. So if you can search for those, and yes, we
Mhm.
did have the official recipe from whatever it was, uh, 1779 in Connecticut. But, we also I was very, being a fan of evolution and change, I was happy to have people bake whatever kind of cake they wanted. So it didn't have to be the original recipe from 1789.
And did you make that recipe, and was it tasty, or was it like, ugh?
I did make it. I liked it. I mean, they loved their spices. They loved cloves and cinnamon. That was, I'm sure a lot of the food was rotten, so it was pretty
Right.
good to to cover up the
Like
putrefaction.
the rancid butter and yeah.
Exactly. So if you like that, if you like some good hearty New England spices like cloves, then you're gonna like that original recipe. If not, then I recommend Yeah, go into something a little more modern.
So you took well, I mean, you took all of the parts of the Constitution seriously, and you acted as much as you could under them. And one in particular was the right to petition Congress.
Oh, yes, thank you
And
for
you
bringing that up.
yeah, so tell us, because you actually did that.
I did, I have and I still have it, actually, here it is, and it was written in quill pen,
Oh,
hundreds
look
and
at
hundreds
that.
of names, and petitions, thank you, Eric. I'm glad you appreciate that. Yeah, petitioning was actually historically very important to the abolition movement and various other movements because it was a way for disenfranchised people to get their word out. You know, women before they could vote could petition, and it's right there in the First Amendment. It's one of the first five rights we have. So I wanted to express it, and as I've mentioned before, one of my little pet causes is how horrible it is that we have a president who has so
Mhm.
much power. We have a deranged monarch, as Deborah puts it. So I thought, let's try. I thought, what if I started a petition to have Congress consider going back to Ben Franklin's idea of multiple presidents? And I was sort of half tongue in cheek because I knew that this is not a realistic uh, thing, but I also just wanted a way to address how much um, how much abuse of power the current president is exercising. So I started this petition to have Congress consider going back to three presidents. I got thousands of signatures, uh, and I was able to bring it to Washington and present it in person, um, to, Senator Wyden from Oregon, and I went with all of I had my hat and I had my outfit, and he agreed to see me, partly because his wife owns a bookstore, the Strand bookstore, so he's a big fan of books, and he was very nice. He said, I don't think that 3 presidents is a good idea, but I agree with you that the president needs to be reined in, and he's actually fighting for that, including tariffs, making sure that but one of my
So
favorite parts was oh, go ahead.
just if I could stop, so who was president when you were doing this? Was this under Trump 1?
No, this was 2 years ago, so I guess it was Biden.
Oh.
Yeah, it was
Oh, I
Biden.
didn't realize it was that recent. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And he was going to have a meeting right after my meeting with him with the Biden administration to talk about how Congress should be more in charge of tariffs. So they did not let me in with the musket. Thank you for asking, Patricia. Yeah, they were pretty serious. Uh, but it was a fascinating trip to, and I was I did express my First Amendment rights because he brought me in front of a scrum of reporters, like 15 reporters, and I started talking about my the First Amendment and the right to petition, and uh, and I did get a little bit of coverage from people saying, basically, what the hell is going on? Why is there a guy dressed like a Revolutionary War soldier stalking the halls of Congress? But
The thing is that now representatives, your right to to read to protect to the easy for me to say. Your right to petition is supposedly being satisfied by you go to their website and you fill out a form to send them an email, and we all know that those emails, not very few of them actually get read. Most of them either just get binned or stuck in a folder, because there's so many of them. So where you might think that modernization and computers and the internet have made the right to petition easier, and more accessible to everybody, the sheer volume of it, this is the reason why when we tell people to contact their representative, we say, "Don't send an email. It's never going to get read. You have to call because they have to answer the phone, or you can at least leave a voicemail." So I was just the juxtaposition of that, I'm imagining that you actually were more able to exercise that right by doing it the very old style way than many people. They're exercising the right, but it isn't ever actually being transmitted.
That's a great point. Yeah, I love that idea of calling your representative instead of just going. And especially now with AI, where you can generate thousands of letters,
Yeah.
uh, that is ripe for manipulation. So, yeah, I think there is going to be a swing back towards the analog to the in person. If you want to make a difference, then yeah, try to show up. Uh, I get answers that do not address my inquiry when I send an email to Democratic representatives. Yeah, now
I always
that.
call. I'm curious about the question right above Deborah's. Do you
Oh, do
see
I have
that?
siblings?
Is
I
that
do.
I'm
I
I'm
have.
curious why.
Yeah,
I
often
mean,
people ask, "Do I have a wife and kids?" Which I do, and I am still married. She didn't love parts of this project. She did not love the
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 beard.
coverture. She did not love the smell of candles. I had to use beef tallow candles because that's what they used. So our
Mhm,
apartment
mhm.
smelled like meatloaf. So yeah, she had issues with some of it, but she does love history, and this was one of the greatest history lessons I've ever had in my life. So she got to tag along with me on that one, or join me on that one.
So, for people who have just recently joined, first of all, we are talking with author A.J. Jacobs. He is the author of The Year of Living Constitutionally, which he did.
True.
He also wrote The Year of Living Biblically. That was his first book of years of X. And I want to ask you, do you, with the perspective that you have of, the Year of Living Biblically, and then constitutionally, and then living now in present times, do you feel that the difference between the biblical times and the constitutional times was more or less different than between constitutional times and now?
Oh,
If you can
that's
make
a
that comparison.
yeah, that's a fascinating question that I haven't given too much thought about, but let me think right now. I mean,
Mhm.
uh, one big one big thing they had in common was what we had talked about before, the sense of community. Biblical life especially, there was very little about the individual. It was all about your family, your tribe, and your responsibilities. It wasn't about your individual rights. It was about your duty to the elderly, your duty to your community. And I feel that that mindset was also present in in constitutional days. Uh, and I don't wanna go. I love individualism. I am a fan, but I do think we need more balance. Um, uh, like the idea of the Bill of Rights, I think that if the founders had seen where we were going, they would have had the Bill of Responsibilities in addition to the Bill of Rights, uh,
Yes.
to balance it. So that is one example, and I do think, uh yeah, both of them had very different, uh, senses of community in that it was not, uh, it was very much harder to be anonymous. So you had to,
Right.
which I think has made a huge difference in the age of the internet. Like you can say the most horrible things without any consequence because you cannot, uh, and that back then, if you were making a speech, then you were making a speech, you were saying it.
Well, and then for people who have joined after, as you mentioned, voting was done by voice.
Right.
Everyone knew how you voted, which was, very different. My dog might be about to start barking, so I apologize if that happens. Um,
Thank you,
so
Deborah. Have a good dinner.
I'm glad. Oh, she's having a great cook for her. Ask about something to see if they. Oh, okay. do your siblings share your interest in
Oh.
these sorts of things?
Uh, well, she is very intellectually curious, and she does read my books, but she doesn't, I don't think she likes to, do the, uh, carry the musket and, or grow. I guess she can't grow the beard, but, yeah, but she is, it is it is nice to have a supportive family, and, I mean, I will say that writing about your family is very tricky,
Yes.
uh, because, first of all, in a book, it can't all just be happy because no one wants to read that. We as humans, for better or worse, love the conflict. So when I'm writing about my marriage, I mean, I'd say 90% of the time we are in harmony, but 10% of the time we are at each other's throats. And that's the 10% that people want to read. So,
Oh, well,
uh,
that's too bad.
but
Did your
But I
wife get
always
to read
give
the
my
galleys?
family, like, censoring privileges,
Okay,
so
that's what I
I
was
show
wondering.
them what it is, I'm writing, and they get to censor, and very rarely do they do because I usually come off worse, that's sort of I'd prefer to be I'd prefer to be the one looking like an idiot than making my family look like an idiot.
Well, it's very gallant of you, and speaking of your family, and we just have just a few more minutes, um, do we have just a few more? Oh, we have 14 minutes, so that's still good. Um, but the last question that we got emailed in from the audience is, what did your kids think about what you were doing? And I would like you to answer that both in the moment when you were actually doing it, and then when now that they may have gained a little perspective, might be a little bit older. Um, they
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on the project. So, for the Constitution book, I have 3 sons, and at the time of this, they were about, I think, 17 and 19. Um, 2 of them were quite I mean, all dads are
Oh,
embarrassing,
dad, yeah,
but
like
I take it to a new level, and I realize that, so I'm happy that they put up with me. Uh but one of them actually kind of got into it. He saw it as performance art. One of his
Mhm.
favorite comedians is this guy named Eric Andre who does these crazy performance art things. So at one point, I had to go out into Times Square. I was trying to fulfill my Second Amendment rights because I'm Third Amendment. Sorry, Third Amendment. The Third Amendment, as you might remember, says that you do not have to quarter a soldier
Oh,
during
right,
peacetime.
billeting. Yes, yes.
Yes, no billeting. So I thought it would be interesting to
Remember that.
quarter a soldier, to bring a soldier back to my house, and then I could kick him out if I wanted to. Like that was my right. So we went to Times Square and I was dressed like this, and he put on a tricorn hat too, and we went
Nice.
out and we went to, it was Fleet Week where there are thousands of sailors in Times Square, and I would
Mhm.
go up to him with my son and say, "Hey, would you like to come over and sleep at our house?" And so
Oh my god. Wait,
and
wait, wait,
yeah,
I mean,
they
it's New
were
York.
taken aback.
Yeah, I mean, did you actually find someone
I did
uh,
find a soldier,
did you
not through
film
that
this?
method. What? I do have, some video of it, and, some of them were very flattered, like, "Thank you," but, a lot of them were like, "This is very weird." I tried to explain it was all for the Constitution, but I did find a friend of a friend who was uh, in the Navy, and he was making a trip to New York, and, I put him up, and it was fascinating. It was a fascinating conversation, uh I talked about things that I had not really given a lot of thought to. For instance, the civilian military divide,
Mhm.
and that I'm in a bubble. I live on the Upper West Side of New York, and my grandfather and father were in the military, but I don't interact with a lot of people in the military, and I think that is a problem. I think that's a problem for our country if we want some sort of cohesiveness. So we talked a lot about that. Uh, and of course, that was not a problem when our country founded because everyone was all men at least were in the military. Uh, So it was actually a wonderful experience, and he was a very polite soldier, so I never did kick him out. He just stayed for a few days.
But, I'm guessing, 'cause I will tell you that what I have been seeing in the wow, it's been a year and a half already that I've been doing this, notes from the front. Um, I you know and it's, a whole lot of people just, are and I blame our educational system, right? A whole lot of people really don't have any idea about what our Constitution even says, what our constitutional rights are, and also what the limits are. And I also was a veteran. I don't know if you knew that. I was in the
Oh, no.
Army, and,
Thank you.
so going from that, thank you for saying that. And so, uh, you know, in the totality of my own experience and what I've seen, I am guessing that he probably also didn't know what were the restrictions and limits and boundaries of, for example, he probably, if he did know, I'd be very surprised, didn't even know, about billeting at all,
Right. Well,
right? So I'm sure you enlightened him.
I hope so, but what you say is so true. That was one of the main motivations right from the start. I read a statistic that the majority of Americans have never read the Constitution, and I realized I was in that majority. I had read sections of it, but I never read it, all the way through. And, it is, I think that it's not even that long. So,
Right.
I think that that is a huge problem. I think that we do need more. Maybe this sounds old-timey and like I'm from the 1950s, but I think we need a lot more civic education in schools. It doesn't have to be like salute the flag. It can be how do you make change? What is the best way to organize a society as large as ours? But that is just not something that, uh, I got taught a lot in high school, and I don't think my kids did either, and I think that is one of the roots of our problem.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, the other thing is that, well, I don't know
But
how it is
I like
now.
Patricia's point, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I would be shocked if Trump had read the Constitution from top to bottom. That
I
was yes,
I'm
thank
pretty
you, Schoolhouse Rock.
I'm pretty sure that they are keeping it from him.
That's true.
They're telling him what it says, and that's, and that's a whole 'nother, conversation. But I mean, I don't remember anything from high school in terms of, like, what I remember from my history cla I remember one thing that I remember her name, Mrs. Britton, and the one thing I remember, because it was the most boring class. I mean, that's part of, my rant is that some of the most important classes that are being, uh, offered, taught, in high school or even elementary school are, they're not being taught in a way that actually engages. They're being taught at the students instead of with the students. So the only thing I remember from American history class, which I don't even know why she was talking about it, was her rant that, by the time we're of the age to get Social Security, it wouldn't be around anymore because it would have gone bankrupt. And it wasn't until I got to undergrad, I was so lucky to have in undergrad these amazing history professors,
Mm,
and I think that we need amazing history teachers in high school, and I'm not even blaming the teachers. I mean, they're under so much pressure and have to do so much with so little, but it's a shame that
right,
we're
agree.
not getting that,
I mean,
and
I have if I were in charge of a school, and by the way, thank you, Patricia. No offense to the 1950s. Um,
I'm from there
if
too.
if I were a teacher, I think one of the ways that I would be most engaged as a student would be to uh, try to recreate the Constitutional Convention because there are so many challenges. How do you set up a country? And
Yeah,
and having kids participate as opposed to just being lectured at, that no offense, Dave, would I think that is one of the best ways to learn. There is there are studies that by doing something you are learning a lot more. So that
absolutely.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I mean, this is a tangent, and I mean, it's a little personal, but I mean, that's one of the many reasons that we homeschooled our son,
Mm.
was, we homeschooled him not religiously, in fact, not at all to do with religion, but because we wanted to make sure that he got the academics that we actually thought were important and that he would be engaged and not just sitting in the back of a classroom bored out of his mind and, having basically the child, a child has an innate love of learning and having that dampened by, uh, you know, we just wanted to make sure that that didn't happen, and I'm happy to say that, I mean, to this day, like, my son reads, which is apparently unheard of for I mean, he's 28 now, but he was always an avid reader, and people would look at him we'd go to a coffee shop, and he'd be sitting reading a book, and people looked at us like we had 3 heads, like, "Oh, this child is reading." Like, "Well, yeah." But, I mean, so, anyway, again,
Well,
that's
I
a
am
tangent.
yeah, I am very impressed. I mean, I thought about that, but I did not have the time or patience to do it. So I tip my tricorn hat to you for doing that.
Well, so Patricia is saying that you should teach a course, and I do not disagree. And then
Thank you,
Dorothy
Patricia.
said she donated quill pens to a class studying
I love
Revolutionary
that.
history. Yeah.
I
Um,
I actually I have hundreds of quill pens because I make them. I'm able to I buy goose feathers and then I carve them. And that was another uh, a little lesson. It wasn't perhaps the major one, but just the idea of craftsmanship and doing things by hand is something that we've lost, and I think that is a shame. I mean, we're so alienated from the objects around us. We have no idea how they work. And we
right.
could never make them. So this idea of craftsmanship, and you see it, I think, in Etsy and these other do-it-yourself movements, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, so first of all, we have just a couple of minutes. Is there anything that you would like to cover or say before we get to the top of the hour?
I guess one of my heroes, my favorite founding father, despite he also had flaws, was Ben Franklin.
Hmm.
Uh, but one of my favorite things he talked about was he really embraced epistemic humility and the idea that Uh, we all none of us know everything, and we should be more flexible in our thinking. In his autobiography, he says that when he's talking to someone, he always starts, "Well, it seems to be," or "I could be wrong, but," and I love that way of talking because I feel if we are gonna make any progress with people who disagree with us, and maybe there's no way to make progress, maybe it's a lost cause, but if we are, then saying phrases like that, I think are very important.
I completely agree. I love that, and yeah, Patricia, I love that too. Um, AJ, before we sign off, first of all, please tell people your books again and where they can find you.
Oh, well, thank you, Anne, and I'm a big fan of Anne, so I'm just
Oh, thank
thrilled
you.
to be here. Thrilled. Well, my book is everywhere there are books, The Year of Living Constitutionally, and I love writing my Substack where I deal with all sorts of issues like this, so it's called Experimental Living, so Substack.com, Experimental Living, or however you get to it.
I think it's
Uh,
experimentalliving.substack.com. They
that's
never
it.
make it easy, right?
Thank you,
Um,
Anne.
and again, everybody, if you are not already following AJ, please, please do, because he's just an awesome, awesome person. AJ Jacobs, it has been such a pleasure having you. Will you come back sometime? I know everyone would love that.
I would be honored. Thank you, and thank you for all that you do, which is a lot, which is huge. So
Well,
really
thank
appreciate,
you.
and thank you all for coming. Have a great
And
night.
And for those of you who tuned in late, again, the instant replay recording of this will be available to all of you, either through me or through AJ. He'll have that as
Yep.
well. And this is again, thank you for kicking it off. I am just so thrilled that you're the guy that kicked off our, the "My Country 'Tis of Thee" interview series. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with attorney Jordan Parker, who's going to be talking about practicing law and in with the Constitution and this administration. Wednesday, Danielle Reif, who is a retired American USAID diplomat, will be with us. And on Thursday, we'll be talking with Jesse Wegman, who is with the Brennan Center for Justice and just wrote a book about the lost founder. Uh, so I hope you will join us for that as well. In the meantime, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful and safe evening. AJ, thank you again.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Huzzah, everybody.
Huzzah!